There is a kind of power that doesn't announce itself with more hacks, more inputs, more ambition, but with less. And you feel its edge the instant you begin to subtract, because subtraction exposes what you are hiding behind. The first things to quietly eliminate are not objects, but behaviors that tax your attention and seek to sell your agency by the hour. The performative business that passes for status, the inbox driven mornings that colonize your judgment before you're fully awake, and the ambiguous promise that feels kind in the mouth but rot into resentment in the calendar. The Stoics would call this a return to what is appropriate. Oikiosis, the fitting of the self to its function. Business is cosplay for importance. It is a costume woven from meetings without owners, messages that could be decisions, and errands that keep you near applause and far from consequence. It's an economy denominated in visibility rather than results, and like all inflationary currencies, it buys less every quarter, quietly eliminated by refusing to use activity as a proxy for impact. You do this without slogans and without theater. You define the single outcome your day must advance. You schedule one deep, early block that moves the outcome with proof at the end. And you starve the rest of your tasks of their borrowed glamour by quarantining them to a short quarrel later. If someone asks you for a time that cannot name the owner, the decision, or the deadline, you decline or convert the ask into an artifact, a memo that states the problem, a short list of options with trade-offs, a smallest possible test that will return a verdict. You stop narrating your hours to yourself as if velocity were virtue. You count shipped nouns, pages, prototypes, decision captured, process documented, and you allow the quiet of a day with fewer bragging rights and more consequences to do its sober work on your identity. This subtraction, it's not a vibe, it is a boundary. It sounds like, I can't own the whole thing, but I can deliver X by Y. It sounds like, to make this meeting worth it, we will have to leave it with a single owner and a date. It sounds like, nothing at all when you protect your early block with a closed door and a phone in another room. Because the most eloquent refutation of formative business is a stream of small undeniable outcomes that do not require a witness to be real. Then you eliminate the morning that sells your attention to the highest bidder before you've taken your own pulse. An inbox-driven dawn is not neutral. It is an identity program that tells your nervous systems you are a switchboard, not a pilot. It replaces Stoic asset. What is this thing? What is mine to do? With Pavlovian reload, the fix is neither extreme nor ascetic. It's architectural. You wait for yourself first. Then 10 minutes without screens is enough to reassert jurisdiction. Water, breath that lowers your shoulders by a centimeter. In a 3-line page that refuses drama and orders attention. One line of fact about the day and you're actually in. One line naming the virtue you practice on purpose inside the fact.
Usefulness stays clean when boundaries are clean. Practice 2 sentences until they're muscle memory. I can't own this, but I can deliver X by Y. I'm happy to collaborate. I need A decided by B to proceed. Say them calmly once and pair limits with paths so your no makes the world easier, not heavier. This is justice at human scale, aligning your effort with the common good without injuring your integrity. It keeps your yes true, your help honest, and your energy available for the problems you were actually built to solve. To maintain that honesty, you install the smallest ritual. Most professionals secretly rely on the 5-minute review of promises. Every afternoon before fatigue turns avoidance into poetry, you look your word in the eye. What did you say? What did you do, Jenny? What must be renegotiated before sunset so trust doesn't pay the bill for your pride tomorrow? Saying the note, surface reality. People learn to breathe around you when you stop making them guess. Architecture beats willpower, so you set your environment to make the right thing cheap and the wrong thing expensive. Put the notebook on the keyboard so paper meets your hands before pixels. Put shoes by the door so movement is a stumble away. Keep a one-tap policy so focus has fewer cliffs to fall from. Log out of traps and bury notifications where they can't ambush you in the soft hour. Then close the day on purpose. Dim the room, pack tomorrow into a small box, jot 3 lines that convert the fog into handholds, and stop. The world will beg for your midnight performance. Don't sell tomorrow's clarity for tonight's applause. Sleep like a person who expects to be needed in the morning, because you are. That is how you keep sovereignty renewable. None of this is glamorous, and that's the point. Unstoppable is not ferocity, it's fidelity. It's a choreography of small, sane moves repeated so consistently that even chaos has to negotiate with your order. On days when weather hits, the sick child, the broken plan, the unexpected pivot, you reduce without quitting. You shrink the block, you keep the ritual, you send the renegotiation, and you protect a remnant so your mind files the work under moving, not doomed. Adults expect weather and build gutters. You will be accused of being mechanical until outcomes make the critique look like a wish. You will be tempted to perform usefulness instead of practicing it, resist the covert contracts that rot morale, and pick clarity over theater every time. You will forget and drift, refuse to miss twice. The habit is not a halo, it's a hinge. It swings quietly, and it changes everything it touches. If you need a North Star while you practice, take this one. Be the person whose day produces evidence. Evidence that you aimed your attention before the world drafted it. Evidence that you moved one hard thing when it still mattered. Evidence that your body helped your mind instead of hijacking it. Evidence that your words had edges. Evidence that you reduced friction for other people without leaving an invoice in the air. Evidence that you closed the day with enough left over to respect tomorrow. Stack enough days like that, and you won't need to tell anyone you're unstoppable. Rooms will adjust around you. Projects will move when you touch them. Your evening will feel lighter because you didn't mortgage it to buy significance at noon. And when you look back, you'll see the most unromantic secret of all. Reliability is a superpower available to anyone willing to trade performance for practice. Keep these 10 habits without drama, guarded by boundaries and simple architecture, and let the proof accumulate where it counts. In your work, your relationships, and your character, fate permitting. There is a second discipline that looks almost too plain to matter until you practice it long enough to realize it is the quiet hinge on which your whole day swings. You put the body in order so the mind has a house that will not sabotage it, and you point the mind with a single sheet of paper so it will not wander into the tall grass. Begin with movement that is humble enough to keep and honest enough to change your chemistry. Temperance, to a Stoic, is not austerity for its own sake, it is design. You are designing a body that does not hijack reason every time an email pings or a meeting turns ambiguous. 20 to 30 minutes will do it. No heroics, no mythology of beast mode, just a brisk walk without audio, so attention can detox, a short mobility circuit that unglues the hips and upper back desk life has calcified, or a simple strength trio that teaches your nervous system it can generate force when it feels small. You breathe through the nose until the jaw softens, you let the breath fall all the way out and watch your shoulders drop by a centimeter, and with that small mechanical surrender, the story machine in your head loses its grip on catastrophe. None of this is for photographs. You are regulating the animal so the pilot can think. People who treat their bodies like shrines to aesthetics often break under ordinary stress. People who treat them as forgotten forklifts rust into chronic crisis. You're doing neither. You are building a machine that can carry a sane day. The ritual pairs with a page, and the page is almost offensively short because the point is steering, not literature. You sit with a pen and write 3 lines that prevent 9 hours of drift. First, a fact, in fewer than a dozen words, about the day you are actually in. Review at 3, travel day, budget frozen, child's recital, energy medium. You do not smuggle verdicts into the line, Total chaos day is not a fact. It is surrender with adjectives. Second, a virtue you will practice on purpose in that context. Wisdom that asks before acting, justice that relieves friction for the next person, courage that says the sentence you owe, temperance that stops at enough. Third, a next step with an edge, not a dream. Draft the opening problem and one proof. Ask the question that will prevent useless work, decline kindly, and offer option B. Pack and close loops by 9. These lines are Marcus Aurelius. Modernized, no oratory, no therapy, just a steering wheel in ink. Attention obeys concrete, near-term verbs. When it has neither, it wanders into feats and fantasies and calls the wandering research. The page is a contract with your attention that fits inside 90 seconds. When a meeting approaches, you can run a mini version before you walk in. One fact about the room, one virtue you will show, one outcome you will advance. You enter as a citizen of the problem, not a critic of the people. When conflict heats, you can write the same triad mid-conversation to keep your tongue from becoming a weapon. The fact of what happened without mind reading, the virtue that will govern your next sentence, the smallest process that returns both of you to reality. Afterward, you capture a single line of policy. Ask for desired outcome before debating methods, confirm owner and deadline before leaving. When tone spikes, move to a whiteboard and name the issue. Policy is portable wisdom. It keeps you from paying tuition for the same lesson twice. There will be days when you feel too busy to move and too agitated to write. These are the days that decide whether your philosophy is decoration or architecture. You will be tempted to bargain with yourself. Later, when the inbox is lighter. Later, when the sky is better. Later, when motivation returns with its flag. Later is a liar. You can move for 8 minutes and you can write 3 lines in 90 seconds. You can do cat-cow on the living room floor while the toddler stacks blocks beside you, and you can write the fact, virtue verb in your notes app in the hallway outside the hospital room. You will not win medals for it. You will win a day you can live without rehearsal. If you insist on purity, you will build a religion you cannot keep and then despise yourself for apostasy. If you insist on continuity, you will build a craft that survives weather. The reserve clause is your ally here, fate permitting. Fate does not always permit a perfect session. It almost always permits a scaled one. Reduce without regretting. The identity you are training is, I keep small promises under weather. That identity is worth more than any single workout or beautifully penned page because it becomes precedent. And precedent is the quietly compounding asset that carries you when courage is average. Notice how the two tools reinforce each other. A body that just did 5 honest sets is a mind less afraid of 1 honest email. A walk that rescued your breath gives you the calm to write a next step that is clean instead of a fantasy that lets you hide. The page, in turn, makes the movement count for more because it converts feel-good chemistry into action, good reality. The 3 lines funnel the diffuse sense of readiness into a verb that moves a project or a relationship 1 notch forward. You begin to experience what professionals know and amateurs romanticize. Most morale problems are loop problems. Open loops hum like anxious machinery. Closing even 1 loop early in the day sends a memo to your whole system that you are not at the mercy of drift. So you pair the walk with send the boundary sentence, and you pair the strength set with draft the first 3 slides, and you let the small completions stack into a day that feels surprisingly quiet even when it is full. Quiet is not boredom. Quiet is the absence of self-betrayal's background noise. If you want to measure without turning your life into a dashboard, use kindergarten metrics. Mark a dot for movement. Write 1 noun for what you shipped after the page. Page, outline, call log, draft. At the end of the week, you are not allowed to feel like a failure if the dots are there and the nouns are real. Pride in the right things is not vanity, it is fuel. If you see blanks, you do not hold a trial. You apply the only rule that keeps streaks honest. Never miss twice. Missing once is weather. Missing twice is a pattern. Shrink the gap between slip and return. That is how adults become improbable to stop, not by never falling, but by the speed and calm with which they stand up. Let this discipline lower the cost of being around you. A regulated body and a concise brain make rooms calmer. You will notice colleagues breathe easier when you ask, before debate, what outcome are we trying to achieve today and what would make that easier in the next hour? You will notice loved ones trust you more when your energy is not borrowed from tomorrow and your speech is not a fault bank of qualifiers and hidden invoices. This is justice at human scale, fitting yourself to the whole so the whole moves with less friction. You are not issuing manifestos. You are making small promises that reduce drag for other people. That is attraction in its most adult form. It does not glitter, it bears weight. Finally, receive the humility embedded in both practices. The body reminds you you're an animal with limits. The page reminds you you're a citizen in a world that does not owe you ideal terms. Humility is not groveling, it is contact with reality. When you move, you take responsibility for the energy you bring into rooms. When you write the 3 lines, you take responsibility for the clarity you demand from rooms. If Providence wants to surprise you, it will. Your job is to be surprise ready, rested enough to respond, clear enough to choose, steady enough to say no when a glittering distraction asks you to trade a month of progress for an hour of applause. You will close the day with the minor, almost comic satisfaction of a person who did exactly what they said they would do on a Wednesday. That feeling is not small. It is the early rumor of a life that can carry pressure without becoming a performance and pursue ambition without becoming a plea. You move the body so the mind can see. You aim the mind so the hands can build. You repeat until the repetition becomes character, faith permitting. There is a difference between being impressive and being indispensable, and the gap between them is the exact place where most talented people stall. Impressive asks for attention. Indispensable reduces friction. Impressive needs an audience. Indispensable makes the work move whether anyone claps or not. The Stoics would call this justice at human scale, fitting yourself to the common task so the whole moves more cleanly. And it begins with a quiet decision. Today, I will be useful without performing. That sentence sounds small until you practice it, because useful without performance requires you to stop paying yourself in the counterfeit currency of being seen and start banking in the hard asset of outcomes. It asks you to notice what the room actually needs, not what would make you look like a hero. It asks you to build without leaving an invoice in the air. And it asks you to bring boundaries that keep your service from curdling into resentment, because nothing grows neediness like help that was secretly a transaction. If you want to feel the difference immediately, start treating ambiguity as your cue to create clarity artifacts instead of commentary. Where others write paragraphs of opinion in threaded chat, you turn the sprawl into a single summary and 3 decisions with names and dates attached. Where a document has sat untouched because no one wants to be wrong in public, you draft the first 30% so others have something real to respond to. The first pass is never perfect, but it is the only thing that pulls a team from the swamp of "we should." Where 2 people argue abstractions, you propose the smallest test that returns the verdict from reality. Let's run both versions with 5 users. By Friday, I'll set it up and report the signal. These gestures look plain on the outside and feel radical on the inside because they move the center of gravity from performance to progress. The paradox is that usefulness like this turns into the only status that doesn't rot trust. People start calling you earlier, not because you're loud, but because you're dependable, and in a world that bleeds time, dependability is charisma. You will not sustain this stance without boundaries. You can say calmly and keep under stress. The boundary is not a punishment. It is a frame that allows your yes to stay true. You learn 2 sentences and let them live in your mouth the way a craftsman keeps the right wrench within reach. The first scopes your help without theater. I can't own this, but I can deliver X by Y. The second protects standards without spike. I'm happy to collaborate. I need A decided by B to proceed. You say them once in a humane tone and pair each limit with a path. Not this, but that. Not now, at 2, not me, ask Dana who holds the context. The first time you say them, guilt will try to convince you that boundaries are selfish. They are stewardship. They make you reliable instead of resentful. They teach others how to succeed with you. And they convert your reputation from always available, which is another way of saying unprotected, into always clear, which is another way of saying professional. There is a darker cousin to usefulness that you have to excise if you want your gravity to hold: the covert contract. A covert contract is a favor disguised as generosity that expects a return you never stated. Covert contracts generate quiet rage because reality refuses to pay invoices it never received. The Stoic cure is explicitness at the front and release at the back. At the front, state scope, timelines, and terms you can respect or do not offer at all. At the back, once you deliver, let it go. You acted because it was good to act, not because it guaranteed applause. You can still negotiate for pay, title, scope. Do it in daylight, with clean language and measurable edges. The work you do to be seen will eat you. The work you do because it is right will feed you. Usefulness without performance has a tone, and you can hear it in the way you talk about other people's ideas. The immature posture makes a living by refutation. It feels strong because demolition is easy. The mature posture begins with steelmanning. You state the other side's argument so fairly that they would sign their name to your summary. Then you offer the constraint they may have missed and the test that might resolve it. You replace debate club theatrics with design lab experiments. You make it safe for truth to win. The result is that people who want to build begin to find you because you are less interested in winning the room than in letting the right answer win the work. This is courage at conversational scale, to risk your cleverness for the sake of the thing you are making together. On days when usefulness feels like one more demand, remember that tiny, concrete acts compound into a reputation that opens doors you can't pry with charm. You close a loop that saves a colleague 15 minutes this week. They save you 40 next month because they now copy you in while it is still early and calm. You send a one-paragraph state of play to stakeholders. What advanced, what's blocked, what you propose next. Without self-congratulation or defensiveness, you get faster decisions because people trust the signal. You document the steps you took to solve a recurring issue, not as a speech about your excellence, but as a checklist anyone can run. You become easier to replace on that task, which makes you easier to promote beyond it. The ego thinks guarding knowledge protects value. In real rooms, shared clarity is what makes your presence valuable. There is a private fear that stops many capable people from living this way. If I stop performing, will anyone notice me? The answer is yes, but not immediately and not always loudly. Attention is cheap and available to those who beg for it. Trust accrues to those who remove drag with minimal drama. It shows up in who gets the early text when the project shifts, in who receives the call with the problem that still has options, in who is invited into conversations where posture is expensive and progress is priceless. Trust shows up as access. If you want the kind of career and relationships where you are trusted with the unglamorous levers that actually move things, you earn it by being the person who moves things today without turning it into a pageant. Do not mistake usefulness for servility. Justice in the Stoic frame is not say yes to everything. It is align your effort with the common good without injuring your integrity. That means you also say no to work that violates your standards or bankrupts your capacity, and you say it with a warm face and a clear alternative. No, I can't take that on this sprint without dropping the quality bar. Yes, I can review the draft for 20 minutes tomorrow and flag gaps. No, I can't be your proxy in that meeting. Yes, I can write 3 questions that will protect the decision. No, I won't continue on terms that require me to pretend. Yes, I'm open to a new agreement that names pace, purpose, and boundaries. The power of these sentences is not their poetry, it is their measurability. People respect the edges they can see. When they cannot see them, they push until they find them, and both of you feel bruised. Bring this stance home, because usefulness is not just a team sport at work, it is the culture you create in your relationships. You can make dinner less of a scramble by doing the small prep that removes stress for the person you love. You can stop using vague check-ins that ask someone to read your mind and instead say, "What would genuinely help tonight?" You can decline the role of fixer without withdrawing affection. "I won't carry both our decisions, but I'll sit with you while you make yours, and I'll run the errand that buys you an hour of quiet." Boundaries here are not walls. They are doors that keep drafts out and let people come and go without slamming. Love that respects limits is sturdier than love that demands magic. All of this asks you to keep your speech clean. Clean speech is not cold, it is respectful. It strips out hedges that smuggle pressure and removes perfumes that purchase agreement. Instead of, "I was just wondering if maybe we could," you say, "To hit Friday, we need a decided today, can you decide, or should I propose a default?" Instead of, "I'll try," you say, "I can do X by Y." Instead of, "Let me handle it since you're busy," you say, "Would it help if I owned A while you finish B?" The sentences live small on the page and large in the body, because the body relaxes when terms are plain. People lean toward those who make cooperation feel like open water instead of hidden rocks. You are not chasing sainthood here. You are building a craft. Craftspeople love constraints because constraints make skill visible. The constraints of useful without performance are simple: reality over rhetoric, experiments over ego, scope over swirl, boundaries over burnout. You meet those constraints each day in small ways. The summary that saves an hour, the first pass that invites real feedback, the test that ends a circular argument, the "no" with a path, the status note that moves a decision, the checklist that outlives your heroics. Do them for a month and you won't need to announce that you've changed. The room will know. The work will remember. And you will look up one afternoon, an ordinary one with errands and emails, and realize that your influence has become the quiet kind, the kind that doesn't need to be defended because it produces outcomes that are hard to argue with. Fate permitting. Now some exciting news. Our channel now offers a members club. By joining it, you'll unlock exclusive benefits, deeper content dives, and personal insights. Join us on this journey, and let's build a meaningful life together. And I also humbly ask you to leave a comment, as it helps my channel immensely. If you do not know what to comment, just write "better every day" so I know you reached this far. And don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. Also, I've linked some books on Stoicism that helped me become the man I am today, and will also help you achieve a Stoic mindset. There is a fourth discipline that decides whether the first 3 become a life or a phase, and it begins with a blunt admission most people never make out loud. Your inputs are building your outputs. Your environment is scripting your attention, and your calendar is a confession of what you really worship. If you pour noise in, you get static out. If you let other people's urgency colonize your hours, you will call reaction. Work while the essential withers. If you keep promising yourself that you'll read when things slow down, you'll die a brilliant consumer of micropanics with a shelf of uncreased spines. So you choose a library over a feed, and you enforce it like a virtue. 30 quiet minutes a day with one book that outlives the news. Biography that puts pressure on your excuses. A manual that upgrades your craft. A classic that refuses to flatter your era will change the timbre of your sentences and the quality of your decisions faster than any hack. You annotate for use, not for aesthetics, a margin star next to a sentence that you can apply tomorrow, a question mark where you owe an experiment, a box around one policy you will test this week. Then, like a good citizen of the commons, You translate what you read into artifacts that reduce friction beyond you, a checklist a novice could run, a two-paragraph memo that turns fog into a path, a template that saves the next person's hour. The ego hoards knowledge to sell scarcity. The grown-up publishes clarity to buy compounding. This is justice again, played at the scale of tools. To protect the reading and the making from erosion, you curtail the drip. Pick 3 voices for the quarter: a steadying mind, a stretching mind, a playful mind, and let the rest go quiet. Curate ruthlessly. Fewer arguments, more architecture. Fewer takes, more texts. You are not withdrawing from the world. You are lowering the cost of being useful in it. With the input stream disciplined, you take back the time that leaks through 1,000 hairline cracks by installing an afternoon ritual so small it feels beneath your ambition, and so powerful it will rescue your reputation. The review of promises. 5 honest minutes, same hour each day, where you look your word in the eye. What did you say you would do? What have you done? What must be renegotiated before sunset to keep dignity intact? Shame thrives in silence and delay. Respect grows when you surface reality early without theatrics. You send the note that says, "Here's the state of play, here's the risk, here's my proposed adjustment." You pick the smallest next thing that puts the ball where it belongs, on your laces or in their court. And then you do it. The practice is courage with an unglamorous face. Not pretending, not hiding, not letting later rot a relationship that would have survived if you had spoken. The result is that others begin to experience you as a person whose word has edges, whose deviations are announced before they cause bruises, whose yes is not a mood but a measurable thing. That is how trust is engineered, and nothing makes you harder to stop than rooms that now plan around your reliability instead of padding against your chaos. To keep this reliability from depending on heroics, you template your week the way a carpenter arranges a bench. You do not rely on inspiration to show up, you give it a slot. 1 deep work block a day that protects the hard thing first. 1 admin block that quarantines the low responsibility tasks so they stop bleeding into your best hours. 1 outreach block where you initiate rather than only reply requests for feedback, proposals sent, thank yous that keep the bridge maintained. 1 learning block where you translate reading into action, building 1 small tool per week that your future self or your team can run without you. Assign 1 ship per week, an artifact without wiggle room that advances the mission, however small, and deliver it every Friday, fate permitting. On weeks when fate does not permit, you ship a scaled version with a clear note about what remains. You'll be accused of being mechanical until outcomes make the critique look like a wish. The template is not rigidity, it is mercy. It removes a dozen tiny decisions so you can spend decision on what matters. It also reveals vitality. If everything is urgent, nothing is. When your deep work block dies 3 days in a row, you stop lying to yourself and change the environment. Door shut, calendar defense, noise policy for the team, clear escalation rules for what qualifies as an interruption. You stop trying to be noble in the face of chaos and start being practical about not inviting it. Environment is the least romantic and most decisive variable. You also install friction against the behaviors that corrode you. Log out of social on the desktop and bury it on the phone. Place the charger across the room so sleep wins more than doom. Keep snacks that don't melt your afternoon in reach. Preload your calendar with the ritual of promise review so it alarms before you're tired and noble. Sounding avoidance whispers its prescriptions. This is temperance as architecture, not white-knuckling, but stacking the deck so virtue is cheap and vice is expensive. The person who relies on willpower loses to the person who arranges furniture. Use the Stoic reserve clause to protect your psyche while you raise your standard. Fate permitting. Say it before you start the block, and when you reschedule the promise, and at the end of a day that did not go to plan. It is not resignation, it is inoculation against melodrama. The difference between amateurs and adults is not emotion, it is protocol. Adults expect weather and build gutters. When the storm hits, sick child, sudden pivot, possibility you cannot ignore. You practice reduction instead of collapse. You shrink the block, you keep the ritual, you send the note. Continuity beats intensity. Your nervous system learns that you are a person who bends without breaking, and the identity keeps paying you in situations where other people burn all their fuel protesting that life is not a spreadsheet. None of this will matter if your speech stays dirty. Dirty speech is not profanity. It is imprecision that forces other people to read your mind and punishes them when they fail. Clean speech is short, measurable, and kind. It does not smuggle pressure with hedges and sweetness. It does not inflate scope with vague verbs. It asks for decisions in daylight. It pairs every no with a path. When you speak this way for 30 days, the emotional noise in your rooms drops by half because people stop bracing for hidden rocks. You become the person whose emails get answered, whose meetings end 10 minutes early, whose proposals move because you've converted your talk to a place where truth can travel faster. There will be days when you hate the quiet. Performance gives instant hits of significance. Usefulness and systems give delayed, compounding dividends. When the old itch rises, refresh the feed, punt the block, let the afternoon drift into clever consumption. Open your notebook and read a page of your own evidence, the nouns you shipped, the loops you closed, the policies you wrote from pain and then used to avoid it reoccurring, the few sentences of praise that arrived unasked because the work itself made someone else's life lighter. Let pride do its rightful job, pull you back to the craft. Vanity needs applause. Pride needs proof. You have proof. Return to the bench. Finish the small thing that moves the whole. Read 2 pages of the book that steals your spine. Send 1 note that keeps a promise clean. Then go home on time, dim the lights, and perform the antidote to modern self-harm. Stop. The downshift is not a treat. It is the boundary that allows your morning sovereignty to be real tomorrow. You pour water. You breathe, you set out the cues, you say fate permitting, and you sleep. The next day will be ordinary, which is perfect, because unstoppable is not a drama. It is a choreography of small, sane moves repeated until even chaos has to negotiate with your order. There is a 5th discipline that most people treat like an optional flourish, and then wonder why their mornings never cash the checks their nights keep bouncing. You close the day on purpose so tomorrow has oxygen, and you do it with a kind of quiet ceremony that looks unimpressive from the outside and feels like self-respect from the inside. The world tells you to keep scrolling until fatigue drags the phone from your hand. The Stoic answer is temperance turned into architecture. An hour before sleep, 30 minutes if life is crowded. You dim the room, lower the noise floor, and declare the workday closed so your nervous system stops negotiating with phantom tasks. You put tomorrow in a small box it can actually live in, the bag by the door, the clothes laid out, the single sheet with the first hard block named and ring-fenced, the 2 decisions you need from others requested now so you're not performing courage at 8 a.m. In love, the same geometry saves you from becoming a savior. I can talk tonight. I can't carry both your decision and mine. I'll be steady, not endless. In a panic, you are telling your body the most countercultural sentence available to modern adults: enough. Enough for today, not because everything is finished, but because you are not a god, and because the quality of your morning sovereignty is purchased by the honesty of your evening boundary. Then, in a notebook that no one ever needs to see, you keep a 3-line ledger that prevents your mind from doing violence to your dignity while you sleep. 1 line for what moved, blunt, almost boring, a noun and a verb with no adjectives, proposal drafted, call made, deck outlined, run done, kitchen cleaned. 1 line for the virtue you practiced on purpose, and where you saw it, land wisdom in asking before acting during the 3P. 500 words, even if the prose refuses to sparkle. Meeting, justice in sending the summary that saved an hour for 5 people, courage in delivering the boundary sentence you owed, temperance in stopping at 90% when the last 10 was vanity. 1 line for the smallest next step that sets your morning up to win email. 2 questions before bed. Open doc to paragraph 3 and leave a note for 9 done. Place shoes by the door. Fill the bottle and place the notebook on the keyboard so your hands touch paper before pixels. This ledger is not a diary of feelings. It is an audit of conduct and a contract with tomorrow. It converts a day's fog into 3 clean handholds, and it refuses the prosecutor in your head, the chance to pretend nothing happened because nothing was perfect. If you broke a promise, you do not perform a trial. You renegotiate before sleep with a short, humane note that respects the other person's planning horizon and your own limits. Shame thrives on silence. Trust grows on early truth. So you write, here's the state of play, here's the risk, here's my adjustment and the updated date, and you send it while the day still belongs to you, not to guilt. That act alone will quietly change your reputation within a month. People will stop racing around you because you stopped hiding. There is a second part of the downshift that matters as much as the ledger. You release the day. You say the reserve clause aloud, fate permitting, not as a superstitious spell, but as inoculation against melodrama. If you succeeded, you refuse the victory lap that mortgages tomorrow. If you missed, you refuse the spiral that mortgages a week. You hold both outcomes with the same calm sentence: I did what I could inside my circle, and I will wake to do it again if given the chance. This posture closes loops in the body that ambition and self-contempt both leave open. It lowers your heart rate without a moral lecture. It makes sleep a craft rather than a collapse. And because Stoicism dignifies grief as part of life rather than a glitch to be debugged, you also give sorrow and worry a chair, not the throne. You let yourself feel the thing you're pretending you don't: disappointment, fear, missing someone who is gone, and you keep time around it so it doesn't annex the house. 5 quiet minutes, 3 breaths per minute, hands on ribs to prove you're still here. 1 sentence of truth spoken plainly in a room with no audience. I wanted more today and I did not get it. I wanted less today and I got more. I am still a person who keeps promises in weather. You do not bargain with the sky. You do not run to the feet to outsource self-soothing to novelty. You refuse the late-night heroics that are just self-harm in clever lighting. You go to bed like someone who expects to be needed in the morning, which is to say, you go to bed on time. If you share a life with others, this ritual becomes an act of justice at home. You end the day in a way that makes you easier to love tomorrow. Lights low means voices softer. No doom inputs means no emotional debt landing in someone else's lap at midnight. The packed bag means you won't turn your partner into your emergency in the first 10 minutes of the day. The ledger means you don't need them to remind you you're not a failure just because you kept your standards. Downshift shrinks domestic friction not because it performs sweetness, but because it removes avoidable stressors before they wake up to bite. And if you lead a team, teach them this cadence by modeling it without sermon. Send fewer midnight emails. Schedule morning delivery for notes finished late so you don't train panic. Praise the early renegotiation more than the noble last-minute sacrifice. The cultures we live in are the aggregate of our tolerated behaviors. Your evening boundary is a pressure on that aggregate in the right direction. None of this is difficult. All of it is rare. It is rare because the modern script insists on 2 equal and opposite self-injuries: the grind that never stops and calls itself virtue, and the sedation that never ends and calls itself rest. The Stoic counterscript is tender and severe at once. Do the small, certain good cleanly, then stop. Feel what is true without dramatizing it. Then sleep. Wake to your own voice before you're drafted into other people's noise. Then do the next small, certain good. Unstoppable. Turns out not to be the person who never misses a target, but the one who never misses twice. The night ledger is where that rule is enforced with mercy. You see the miss. You name it without poetry. You place the next stone where your next foot will land. You put your tools where your hands will find them when the sun returns. You say fate permitting, because sovereignty means knowing what is yours to govern and what is not. Then you turn off the light, not because your list is empty, but because your life is not a list. It is a craft practiced under weather. In the morning, the metronome begins again, and the fact that it is ordinary is the entire point. There is a final discipline that turns all of this from a streak into a spine, and it begins with an unapologetic choice about identity. You stop trying to feel unstoppable, and you start behaving like the kind of person for whom unstoppable is simply the most accurate adjective available. Identity is not a speech you give yourself in the mirror, it's the residue of promises kept in weather. So you take these 10 habits, not as charms, but as levers, and you run them for 30 ordinary days without asking for fireworks. You begin by writing a single sentence that will carry the month. I am the sort of person who keeps short promises under variable conditions. Then you bring the math of reality to your side. You do not aim for perfect compliance. You aim for never missing twice. You accept that fate will not always permit the full block, the perfect walk, the uninterrupted reading, the immaculate downshift. You reduce instead of collapse, you scale instead of sulk. You send a renegotiation before shame can harden into hiding. Each mark is boring and each mark is holy because each mark returns sovereignty to the only place it can live, now. And because Stoicism is adult about failure, you also decide in advance what you will do when you trip. You write a relapse protocol as plain as a fire drill. This protocol is mercy with teeth. It refuses melodrama's romance and replaces it with a choreography you can execute even when your courage is average. You do not do this alone. You choose one witness, not a warden to whom you will send a tiny daily proof of work, not as performance, but as social gravity. A photo of the 3-line page, a before and after of the ship, a screenshot of the 2 decisions you asked for before bed, a timestamp of the downshift. The point is not applause, the point is friction against disappearance. Most backslides thrive in isolation. Most recoveries begin the moment your day has to pass through another pair of eyes. If you lead a team, you can institutionalize witness without surveillance by sharing artifacts that make everyone easier to help. Short state-of-play notes, checklists that lower the cost of entry, explicit decisions captured in daylight. And because environments write behavior, you keep making the right choice cheaper. You put your book where your phone used to live. You put your notebook on your keyboard so your hands meet paper before pixels. You mop the friction from the hallway between intention and action. Shoes waiting, headphones visible, one-tap policy on the machine, notifications that arrive where you want to be touched, not where you're most vulnerable. You also plant speed bumps at the entrance to your ruinous habits, logouts, physical distance from chargers, declared house rules about late-night inputs, scheduled deliveries for emails written late so you don't train panic as a virtue. You are not performing discipline. You are laying track so the train can run on schedule even when the conductor is a little tired. As the month unfolds, you will learn that your calendar is a moral document and your speech is an engineering discipline. Notice which hours keep their promises and which rooms steal them. Adjust with the bluntness of a builder. Protect the morning block with a door and a policy. Quarantine admin in an afternoon corral. Move meetings that always metastasize to a day where they can't cannibalize your craft. Put the promise review at an hour when you still have honesty left. Clean your language ruthlessly. You are not allowed to say, I'll try, when you mean, I can do X by Y. You are not allowed to let later survive without a timestamp. You are not allowed to export the cost of your vagueness to other people's weekends. And when emotion surges, you grant it a chair by the window, not the throne. You breathe until your jaw loosens. You write the fact without adjectives. You choose a virtue that costs you. You pick the smallest verb with an edge. You act. That sequence becomes a reflex. It is not glamorous. It is strong. Some days will still feel like waste. You will do the block and the page and the walk and still look up at 3 and feel unremarkable. Unremarkable is the soil from which compounding grows. A month of unremarkable fidelity shifts how others plan around you and how you plan around yourself. The room stops padding for your chaos. Your own mind stops rehearsing collapse. The hard thing first, slot becomes a place your courage expects to meet you. The body becomes an instrument you tune rather than an animal you negotiate with. Your service stops carrying invoices. Your boundaries stop sounding like apologies. Your reading stops being a badge and starts being a factory that outputs checklists and questions that make tomorrow cheaper. Your evenings become a kindness to strangers who will deal with you in the morning. And beneath all of it runs the reserve clause, the quiet current that keeps you sane, fate permitting. You say it when you begin, you say it when you adjust, you say it when you sleep. It is not a shrug. It is a posture that keeps you from trying to bully the world into your schedule and frees you to deliver excellence inside the part you actually govern. At day 30, you do not hold a parade, you hold an audit. You read your dots and nouns and short notes. You ask 3 questions that Stoicism loves because they turn sentiment into skill. What capacity returned to me this month because of the way I lived? What policy did pain force me to write that I will now keep on purpose? What 2 rules, if I enshrine them for the next quarter, would make the rest easier? You choose 1 presence rule and 1 protection rule. Presence, first 90 minutes for my future, not my feed, or a single deep block before I reply to anyone, or 3 lines before pixels. Protection, no contact that turns me back into a version I had to heal from, or I don't move deadlines silently, or 2 boundary sentences spoken before resentment speaks for me. You write them on a card and put the card where your hands go, and you calendar a 90-day reread so continuity can do its quiet miracle again. You thank what worked without bragging, and you forgive what failed without theater. You keep the metronome. You leave the drum solo. And when the world changes, as it will, because the world is a river and you are not a dam, you cooperate with its bend instead of insisting on drowning in straight lines. You do not glow. You carry weight. People breathe easier when you walk in. Work moves faster when you touch it. Love costs less to give because you are not bankrupting yourself to purchase it. And you sleep like a person who will be needed in the morning because you are one, fate permitting. Now, if any part of this message has been helpful to you, leave us your like and comment, helping the algorithm recommend it to someone who needs it at this time. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss new videos. And if you look through the videos we've already uploaded, you're sure to find something to take with you. Have a good day.